Okay, so today we're going to start with multiplying square roots. In the upper left-hand corner of your note sheet, you have a spot to write down example number 1. So example number 1, you're going to have 2 square root 3 times 5 square root 7. Now, when you're multiplying square roots, usually you'll first have to simplify that square root. But looking at these 2 square roots, can you simplify the square root of 3? No. Can you simplify the square root of 7? No. When we added and subtracted square roots, or when we combine square roots, do we ever combine the coefficient with the radicand? No. No, we keep them separate, right? So when you multiply square roots, you're also going to keep them separate. So in example number 1, it does not matter if your radicands are the same when you multiply square roots, okay? Adding and subtracting, it did matter if your radicands were the same, but when you multiply square roots, it does not. So you guys have already told me that these 2 square roots are in simplest form. So in order to multiply them, you simply multiply your coefficients together. So what's your coefficients here?
2, 5.
So you're going to multiply your coefficients. So what's 2 times 5? 10. And then you're going to multiply your radicands. So what's 3 times 7? Right, 3 times 7? 21. That's your final answer. Oh, yeah, you did. Because they're right next to each other. So 10 square root 21. Now, do you think they're all going to be this easy? No. Yeah, right. You know how to make it more difficult. So let's take a look at example number 2. Go ahead and write that down. So example number 2. So when you multiply square roots, you're going to have to check something at the end. So let's check something at the front here first, though. So can you simplify the square root of 2? No. Can you simplify the square root of 10?
Yeah.
Well, what 2 factors will you get for 10?
2 and 5.
Multiply it together, what do you get?
10.
2 and 5, you're not going to have any factor pairs from it, are you? So we're going to go ahead and multiply our coefficients together. So if we multiply our coefficients together, what do I get? 16. Then you're going to multiply your radicands together. What do you get? 20. Now, square roots are much like fractions. We always want to write them in simplest form. Is the square root of 20 going to be in simplest form? No. If the square root of 20 is not in simplest form, then you need to go back 2 weeks ago and simplify it. So how do I simplify 16 square root 20? What am I going to have to do here? Yeah, I'm going to do my factor tree. So what 2 numbers? I'm going to ignore the coefficient for the moment, and I'm going to factor my radicand. What 2 numbers can I use to multiply together to get 20?
4 is 2 and 2, right?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to rewrite it. Don't forget your coefficient. What's my coefficient?
16.
Square root. What are my prime factors?
2 times 5.
Okay. Now what do I do?
You said the factor base.
All right. I'm going to come down underneath here. I'm going to put an equal sign. So this factor pair cancels and becomes a single number as the coefficient. But I already have a coefficient out here, right? I'm going to multiply it. So I'm going to take 16 times 2 and get 32.
32. You don't get 10.
Okay, I'll show you why.
2 times 5.
No. Is that 5 part of this factor pair? No. Remember, our factor pair cancels with the square root sign and moves to a single number in the coefficient. But I already have a coefficient, so I'm going to have to combine that 16 and 2. So then 16 times 2 is 32. Then what do I have left as the radicand? The 5. That's going to be simplest form. Okay?
Okay. I'm starting to think you have enough show our work on purpose.
I got a question. So last year, why is your class much easier than Mr. Carter's class?
You think it's easier?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
last time because
His class
so
was
Mr. So you know that was a duo, Mr. Nimitz and Mr. Collins. So I had an F in that class. like, cause that stuff was on something.
Okay, we not
That
doing
stuff.
prime numbers.
Do you guys really think?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a better teacher and I explain things better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just gonna say I'm a better teacher and I explain
They
things
be
better.
doing, they be doing games and stuff.
They have a game every day.
Hey,
So,
Lord.
alright, so
Best game
next part of
ever.
our notes, let's get back. Next part of our notes, multiplying square roots. You are going to have 3 steps you're going to follow. Okay, I'm going to put them all up there at the same time. You're going to multiply your coefficients. Factor your radicants and combine with factors in order. In the last step, you're going to continue steps to simplify the square root. Okay, let's take a look at example number 3. So example number 3, the first step says to multiply our coefficients. Well, do either of these square roots have a coefficient? No. So we're not going to worry about multiplying our coefficients because we don't have them. So we're going to go ahead and go to step 2. Step 2 says to simplify our radicands. So we're going to go ahead and factor each of these radicands. So what are my 2 factors for 6? Okay, and they're both prime, so I'm going to circle them. And what are my factors for 15?
3 and 5.
And those are both prime, so I'm going to circle them. Now I'm going to go down to step 3. Oh, sorry, step 2. We're going to combine the factors in order under one square root sign. So what that means, I'm going to put my equal sign. I'm going to make one square root sign, and all of the factors go under one square root sign. So altogether, for the square root of 6 and the square root of 15, I end up with 4 prime numbers, right? I'm going to put them in order under that square root sign. So how would I rewrite that?
2
Two
times
times
3
three.
times 3 times 5.
Okay. And then the last step, simplify the square root as usual. So what do I do with my factor pairs now? Circle them. And then I rewrite it, right? So my factor pair cancels with the square root sign. It becomes the single number in the coefficient. So what's my coefficient? 3. Square root. What do I have left under my square root sign?
2.
2 times 5, which is 10. So that would be your answer. Okay. So let's try another one. So we have the 2 square root of 98 times 3 square root of 10. So the first thing I'm going to do is what? Multiply my coefficients. Good, Kelsey. So what are my coefficients when I multiply them together?
2 and 3.
Which equals?
6.
So I'm going to rewrite my 6 down here. Now, I'm going to go back and I'm going to factor each radicand. Okay? Make sure you give yourself a lot of room to factor your 98. That's going to have quite a few factors. Okay, what 2 numbers can I use to factor 98?
14 and 7.
Okay, for 14?
2 and 7.
You said it's going to have quite a bit.
I thought I would too.
See what
I was
mean?
wrong. I was wrong.
You talking about it's hard, but it's not hard.
Well, I'll be sure to make your quiz really hard
No,
then.
don't do that.
All right, 10. What are my factors of 10?
5 and 2.
Okay. So now, that's step 1 and part of step 2. The second part of step 2 tells me that I'm going to take each of these prime numbers and write them under a single square root sign. So I'm going to take the factors of 98 and the prime factors of 10 and write them all under the square root sign in order from least to greatest. So the factors I'm going to rewrite from least to greatest is going to be what? Good. And then the last step, we're going to go ahead and simplify as usual. So I circle my factor pairs. They cancel with the square root sign and become a single number in the coefficient. So what am I joining my 6? What's joining with my 6 as a coefficient? The 2, and the 7. And what's left on the inside? 5. So we're going to multiply our coefficients together here. So 6 times 2 is
12.
12 times 7 is, use your calculators, 84. And my radicand stays the square root of 5. Now, the step I'm underlining right now in pink, you don't necessarily have to show me that you're taking the 6 times the 2 times the 7, all right? But everything else you do have to show me. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying there? Any other questions on that one? All right, let's look at example number 5. This means the same thing, right? So I've used a dot to show multiplication. I've used an X, a multiplication sign to show multiplication. And now I'm using parentheses to show multiplication. So multiplication can be written in various ways, okay? So we're going to follow the exact same steps. So step 1 says to multiply my coefficients. So if I go to multiply my coefficients, what do I end up with? Yeah, just a 4. Because 4 times nothing's here, or 1. Well, what's 4 times 1? 4. So step 2, we're going to factor our radicands and then rewrite them under a single square root sign. So what are my factors of 72?
9 and 8.
8 and 9. Okay. 8. And then for 9. Now what do I do? Well, I can't quite do that yet. What do I have to do yet? Yeah. So what are my factors of 75? Okay. And for 15? Now, Darius, I can write my square root sign and all those factors under a single square root sign from least to greatest. So how many factors, prime factors, am I going to have under my square root sign? 8. Now I'm going to put them in order from least to greatest. So,
You got it 2, 3 times.
okay.
3
3 times as well. Okay.
2 times. Isn't that perfect square?
No. Why won't it be a perfect square?
Yeah, 2 different numbers.
Ma'am, I don't have, they're odd numbers. So from here, I then do what?
So I can get pairs.
I'm going to show this extra step just for now, for the sake of we're learning a new lesson. So all these pairs are going to cancel and become a single factor, or a single number in our coefficient. So I already have a coefficient there, which is a 4. And then I'm going to take that times what here? Times 2 times
3.
Okay? And then what do I have left in the radicand?
2 and 3.
A 2 times a 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and simplify. So simplify means I'm going to basically multiply my numbers in the coefficient together. So 4 times 2 is
What's times 2 is
8. 8 times 3 is
16. Well, no, 24.
24. And then what's 24 times 5?
120.
120. And then I'm going to simplify my radicand. So what's 2 times 3?
6.
6. And there's my final answer. What do you guys think? Thumbs up, like, yeah, I got it. In the middle, like, okay, I'm getting it. Thumbs down, you're like, what?
This is a lot. Like you keep adding on to it.
Yep. Start with something basic, and we just make it more and more difficult, right? That's all right. All right, let's take a look at the last example here. So now we have the 2 square root of 50 times the square root of 18. So let's start with step 1, which is to do what? Okay, so if I'm going to multiply my coefficients, it's going to equal
2.
2. Because 2 times, well, there's not a coefficient there, so I can put a 1 will equal 2. Then what do I do next? Yeah, I factor each of my radicans. So what times what equals 50? Okay. And then what about for 18? Nope. 2 and 9. Or 3 and 6. So 2 and 9. For 9? Okay. What do I do with these factors now? What do I do with these factors now?
Under the square root.
Under one square root sign, right? Okay, so I'm going to make my square root sign nice and long. And let's put them in order from least to greatest. What is that going to be?
2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5 times 5.
All right, that second 2 there is the ugliest 2 ever. That's all right. Okay, now what? Circle my pairs. What do I know? All these pairs are going to do what?
Be on the coefficient.
So am I going to have a radicand?
No.
No. So on the outside, I'm going to have 2 times what?
Times.
Now what do I have? Times 5. Okay. So let's simplify it. What's 2 times 2?
4.
Times 3?
12.
Times 5?
60.
Final answer. And that is your lesson for today.